Welcome to Take Your Points, episode 13, the GAA discussion show in conjunction with MVTV. To start, we're going to talk to Cahal Carvill about his column last week. At the weekend, we saw Daniel Heverin, the Marfelt captain, talk about what it meant to win the Derry Championship, and I suppose that sort of rang true with you whenever you think about your piece and what you were talking about. Cahal, would you agree?
Absolutely. It was funny when I watched, and I know Thomas Niblock quite well, and he's obviously a Marfelt man, and he was doing the interview for the BBC, and when you saw Daniel give what it meant to him, I think it was 41 years since Marfelt had won the Derry Championship, and with his family and the friends, club mates, all to be there, and it was a very emotional interview, and it encapsulated for me exactly what I was trying to put down on paper in terms of my article. Luckily, I've been there to winning club championships, and at this time of year, in the piece I referred to it as the sign should say winners only, because if you're still playing at this time of year, if you're still getting the boots on to go under lights on sodden turf to play either football or hurling or camogie with your teammates, you know that you're a winner, because no one's still playing now that hasn't won a club championship and isn't facing into a provincial championship. And it was really, it epitomised what it means to win with your family, your club and your parish and those closest to you. And it was a really emotive interview, and I think it just encapsulated what I was trying to get across in terms of my article. And it rang true for a number of people who actually read the article. A couple of guys who maybe haven't had that success at this time of year that were saying, you know, next year that really has motivated me to go on and try and push on with my club to try and win something, be it junior, be it intermediate, or be at the top of the pile at senior. And I think hopefully that motivates a few people, and I certainly know that interview that Daniel gave has motivated me looking ahead to Sunday.
What do you think it does to the club, though? You know, how does it help the club as a whole to win the championship?
Well, success breeds success. If you look at any successful club that down through the years, the likes of Crossmaglen, that keep coming back, that conveyor belt of players and that will to win. And if you even are a junior club in my own county with College Land, that the young guys in that club are looking up to the players and saying, you know, I want to be there. I want to stand up and lift a trophy in the colours of my club. And even for the community itself, it's a real bond. And you know, let's not forget, the GAA is community based. It's based in villages and towns across Ireland and further afield. It brings people together, and you know, there's a real sense of pride when you see your club doing well. And even if it is at junior level and they're winning a championship, there's a real pride, and yes, I'm from that club and I'm from that community. And you know, at this time of year, no better thing to say than I'm a county championship, or I'm looking forward to a provincial championship.
Do you think the GAA gives it enough time in the season? You know, does it seem sometimes like it's rushed off? Maybe in some counties it does, in some counties it doesn't. But somebody said to me recently, sure, it all goes far too quick. The Ulster Club's gone like that, and it's so important, but people don't have time to enjoy it.
Yeah, I completely agree. And in terms of, obviously we have the county championship, and it's put up there as the inter-county scene is the be-all and end-all. But if you want to go and see real passion, real hunger, real commitment, you know, actually the fabric of what the GAA is, go to a club championship game, you know, where neighbours are going against each other, where you have the chance to win. You mightn't be the best footballer in the world, but you can still achieve greatness amongst your friends and amongst your community. And I think we've talked about the CPA and the GPA and, you know, the changes afoot in terms of tiers and championships and things, but give the club championship and give the clubs their place, and maybe even change the inter-county scene completely and move it, condense it further, so that there's space for Ulster Club Championship, there's space for the county championship, that it's not an afterthought. Because like, look at the scenes at the weekend, you know, in Canterbury, in Armagh with Crossmaglen, again, I think it's Aaron Kieran's 16th championship medal, and you swore it was his first. In Canterbury with Monzi, and you know what he's achieved in his career, and you know, you'd swear to won the lotto along with a lot of those players, and that's really the lifeblood of the association, is the club. And to see those clubs being successful, it would really do your heart good.
And how do you feel about this weekend with yourself going to play Sahneel in the Ulster Club?
Well, as I said in my article, this is what we want to do. This is what we as a village, and I think it's funny that with these Brexit negotiations, it seems to be all of the politicians and the Europeans are all coming to Middletown to see the border. But we're from a part of Ireland that has sometimes been forgotten. But there's a real pride in terms of putting on that black and white jersey, in terms of the players that have gone before us, to see us doing so well, to be playing one of the kingpins of Ulster in the athletic grounds on Sunday. And as I said before, it's going to be a festival of hurling with Dunloy and Ballycran going on afterwards. And for me, I'm really looking forward to it. The fact that I can pull on the boots and tug out with the team is a victory in itself for me, but we'll be looking for a whole lot more. So there's no traffic on the extra mile, and hopefully we'll be continuing that journey after Sunday.
Great stuff, great stuff. Next up, Lenny Harbinson is going to come in and join us, and he's a man who knows about how to win club championships, having won with All Ireland's with St Galls and Antrim championships and Ulster championships with St Galls, so he'll be able to give us his opinion on how that works. But thanks very much for your time.
Thank you, Ronan.
So welcome to Take Our Points, Lenny. Thanks for coming in to the show. I wanted to get you in to start talking about Antrim and Antrim's season in 2020. How excited are you for it, and what goals do you have for the year ahead?
Well, first and foremost, delighted to be here. Thank you, Ronan. In relation to, yes, we're very excited about the up-and-coming season from a number of aspects. Most certainly, big challenge to get out of Division 4. There's going to be a lot of competitive games against counties which have new managers, so it's going to put a new dynamic on it. So for example, our first home game in Glenavy is against Wexford. Wexford just recently been taken over by Galvin from Kerry, so you know it's a very important game, but also I suppose having a high profile person like that, you know, puts an extra bit of spice on it. But from a point of view of just looking at Division 4, we have reinvigorated the panel with at least 12 new players. So again, that brings a new dynamic in terms of enthusiasm, and also one or two players who have been there in the past who are going to lend a wee bit more experience. So when you mirror the new players, some of the players who have played in the past who didn't commit but have now recommitted, their experience on top of the hardcore of 20-25 players who were there last year, really put the shoulder to the wheel. So that combination leaves many of us in my management team very excited about the season ahead and the potential what that brings.
How do you prepare for the league campaign?
So the training ban ends, I think it's the middle of November, so we will then get together, and from that we will meet a number of times during the course of the week, you know, and basically that's your pre-season from an Antrim and a Division 4, Division 3 perspective. That, you know, the hard work will be done this side of Christmas in terms of getting your pre-season and getting your strength and conditioning work continuing on, which had continued on all during the summer. And then from a tactical, structural point, you know, that's where you want to almost decommission the mindset of the players who have been playing with their club in a certain way, in a certain format, to now trying to play in the Antrim setup, which, you know, you have to slightly change and tweak, because county football is most certainly a step up from club football in terms of just something simple, you know, in Antrim football. And like many clubs, some players are expected to do a lot on their own. That's the expectation with their club. Win the ball in your half-back line and drive up the field with that ball and create something in the forward line. You know, if you were to bring that style of play from your club into county, well, you know, you're going to be playing against guys who are equally as fast, if not faster. You're going to be playing against guys who are big and strong. County teams tend to get lots of bodies around the ball to try and strip you of it. So you've got to try and change that mindset of the club player who comes into the county setup to say, look, the dynamic of the game is slightly different. And you know, so that's all the challenge, and that's something which I'm looking forward to.
Okay. Before we move on, I wanted to ask you about the club championships this year. Antrim caught the imagination of everybody because there's so many draws, so many close games. We've changed. It seems like the Antrim Championship has changed from the days when St Galls and Cargan went head to head. Now it seems like there's 5 or 6. How does that make you feel as an Antrim manager?
Well, I think it's got to be good for Antrim football, and it's got to be good for the county. Good for Antrim football because it's made it more competitive, as you just alluded to. In the past it may have been just, a two-horse race, primarily between St Gall's and Corrigan. In fairness to Corrigan, they've won the competition the last couple of years, but a number of other teams like Portlanone, Lamderg, Craigan, and to a lesser degree maybe St John's, have all looked at the competition now and said we have an opportunity not only of competing but possibly winning a championship in Antrim. So most certainly the standard, as we've seen this year with a number of close games, St John's, Portlanone, 2 games there, Lamderg, Portlanone, 3 games there, the county final, 2 games there, so fine margins between 5 or 6 teams now, which most certainly has made it more competitive.
Okay, and you're going to see a lot of those players, from those clubs, coming into the team in next year.
Well, I've watched a lot of football, junior, intermediate, and senior championships, as well as Division 3, Division 2, and Division 1. So, along with my management team, we certainly have taken in a lot of football from right across the spectrum. Hoping to find, particularly in the lower ranks, 1 or 2 players who might be able to make the breakthrough.
And no doubt all the club managers will support you and give you as much help as they can. You've definitely they all be pulling for Antrim too?
Well, most certainly, the support I've had, first and foremost from the county board, has been second to none. Casement, have always been there for Antrim. The Casement Social Club been very, very good with the support behind the scenes. Many of the clubs are delighted to see one or a number of players from their own clubs going out and representing their clubs. So they've been supportive. And of course, from a sponsorship point of view, Craig Concrete down through the years have been massive supporters, along with Northern Properties, to Antrim. So there's a lot of support behind the scenes right across the spectrum of Antrim, and there's been good momentum. The business forum has built momentum, from a financial aspect, and now what we have out in the field, which is the most important, is the clubs now beginning to really compete against each other, which hopefully will be a benefit to Antrim in the future.
Thanks very much for that. That was great.
Thank you.
Lenny, thanks for joining us again. I wanted to speak about the offensive mark that came in at a Congress at the weekend. They've decided that the game now in the new season is going to have an offensive mark, and teams are going to be able to use this offensive mark to their advantage. But some teams used it last year because they were trialled already. But I want to know what you think of it. Is it going to be a help or a hindrance, or how long do you think it can take for teams to get the hang of this offensive mark?
Well, first and foremost, I'm disappointed that it has been introduced, because I don't think it's adding any additional aspect to our game. In fact, I think it's a step backwards in terms of, the soundings coming out of Central Council over the last number of weeks was that it looked like, a number of new rules were going to be ratified. So it came as no surprise on Saturday that a special Congress that it was ratified. But having said that, for me, the game has been evolving since that famous game of 2011 with Donegal and Dublin, where it was pretty much a very defensive game, and there's been lots said about that since over the previous number of years, in terms of too much defensive football and too many hand passing, and how do you open up the game. But I think in the last 2 or 3 years, the game has naturally evolved, whereby teams now, if they can't get the early ball in, have a methodology, something similar to basketball, where you're using width and depth and people on point and movement and whatever else. So the game, for me, was moving in the right direction. So there was no real need to introduce almost like an Aussie style rule in terms of creating this mark. So that's the first thing. So disappointment. Secondly, when you actually look at the modalities of the skill, I don't think there's any real skill of being 10 metres outside of 45 and dinking the ball into somebody who may be 10 or 15 metres just inside the 45, and it doesn't have to be an overhead catch, as long as the ball doesn't touch the ground. So I don't see a lot of skill in that either. And then thirdly, from a point of view of the defensive side of it, immediately I'm starting to think, how do I negate any difficulties this may create for our Antrim team in the forthcoming league? So I'm almost thinking from a defensive point of view now. How do you try and cut that supply off, be it further out the field and more importantly in the inside scoring line?
Cahal, what's your thoughts whenever you heard of the defensive rule? Good thing, bad thing? Do you agree with Lenny or disagree?
It was funny because a lot of the talk was about the tiered championship and how this was going to impact it, but I think the offensive mark is the main thing that's come out of it, and I am totally against it. I think there's absolutely no need for it, and I agree with Lenny on that point. Like, why change it? I know last year they trialled it in the league to a certain degree of success, but one of my friends texted me actually after it was brought in, and he says, "Oh, it's only good for the big men." So a man like myself mightn't see it as an advantage, but I just don't think there's any need for it. If you look back, what teams actually took advantage of it or used it well? To be fair to Tyrone, with Cahal McShane inside and they put Monty Donnelly in, it worked well for them, but it's turned into an AFL game, and this tinkering and changing every year, there seems to be a push for something different brought in with a black card, so we always have to change. The game in itself, players adapt, managers adapt, and it goes through periods where sometimes it's defensive, and we have seen that at the start of the decade. It's changed and different systems come in. If you look at the All-Ireland final in Dublin, who are set the standard, you wouldn't describe them as a defensive team because they've adapted their system to play and to rack up big scores, and then it's up to everyone else to sort of change their position. And I don't think it's incumbent on Central Council to do that for the game. And to be honest, we've seen the mistakes in the black card, bringing in this offensive mark. I think the mark from the kick out has been reasonably successful potentially, but there's absolutely no need for this, and I think it's going to be an absolute disaster for the game.
Moving away from why they did it, do you not understand why the GA continues to change things? Why have we repeatedly changed the systems and structures and rules?
Well, I understand that, but the game naturally evolves. I think back to Park Harrington after he won the 3 majors, and then he completely changed his swing because he said if you're not changing, you're going backwards. But the game has been there for generations before now. But I think in this age of opinions and everyone has to say something about X, Y, and Z, and look at Joe Brawley with the black card that was brought in, and it was off the back of his punditry. And I think the black card's been a disaster, and I don't think it works at all in terms of what it's trying to achieve. And going back to one of the points Lenny made, it's not a high ball going in, and that might work on some occasions, and you put someone 6'10" on the edge of the square, and that might work. But we dinked passes from 5 yards also would work in terms of a mark. And if you look back at Michael Murphy, I think when it brought in, I thought of Michael Murphy's goal against Mayo in the All-Ireland final when the high ball was brought in. He caught it and smashed it into the roof of the net. Is it now that he's going to catch it, stand there and take a shot and kick it over the bar, and we're going to lose that in the game? It remains to be seen, but from my perspective, it wasn't needed. It was fine the way it is. The teams have adapted, managers have adapted, the game has moved on, and it's not for Central Council to bring in this rule, which actually doesn't take us any further.
Mm-hmm. The poor referee, on top of everything else, what he has to do or she has to do in games, now they've got to start adjudicating, was that person just outside the 45 or on the line? Was that a 20 metre pass or was that 18 metres? We're adding additional complexity to quite a difficult game at present for referees to officiate it. So that's the first point. And the second point, is the game going to evolve to a keeper now who kicks the ball from the 20 metre line? Again, another unnecessary rule change in my book, and kicks it out to a big man in the middle of the park who catches the ball, gains a mark, turns around, kicks a high ball into a person on the opposition's 20 metre line who catches a high ball and then gets a free shot at goal. Is that the game? Okay, slight exaggeration is not going to happen every single time, but if it happens 3 or 4 times in a game at an underage level where you have inequality of youngsters who are going through development, one youngster 17 years of age could be 5'2", whilst another youngster, could be 6'3". The team that has a number of youngsters like that are going to have an unfair advantage. I mean, where's the natural running game? Where's the natural kick passing game? We're making too many changes for the sake of change, and which is going to change the scope and the nature and the fluidity of our games. And I don't think it's required.
They put the high fielding on a pedestal above all else. They just want to see they're harking back to the old game where Cahal was competing against big guys. Like that's what they want. The other rule that came up we've spoken about on this show before is the tiered system and how it's going to affect teams. It'll affect teams who are in Division 3 and 4 and Antrim, or in that situation if you don't get to an Ulster final. You spoke already about it on the tiered system. What is your official? Has your attitude changed at all since in the past couple of months?
Well, again, looking at it from a number of perspectives, as a manager of a Division 4 side, and there's lots of good teams in Division 4 and Division 3 who want to be playing football during the course of the summer. Are those Division 3 and 4 teams going to win the All-Ireland? In all honesty, no, because you have to be playing on a consistent basis at a higher level. So how do you then try and rectify the situation in terms of racing standards? So what they've tried to do in the recent past is shoehorn, changes into the provincial system, which is totally not fit for purpose in the modern era of Gaelic football when it was, first devised over 130 years ago. So they need to look at the provincial system. If it was my choice, I would do away with the provincial system, and I would, allow the provincial system to maybe kick in as a pre-season competition in January, and the likes of the O'Byrne Cup and the McKenna Cup and so on, that those competitions disappear. So that's the first thing. Secondly then, for teams like Antrim and the Leitrim's and the Wicklows to try and get good football, when the sod is firm coming into May and June, that's the time of year when you want to be playing, then I think they had a good opportunity here to almost create, which isn't revolutionary because lots of people have said in the past, but you could have a Champions League type of format where you'd have 4 groups, or within one of those groups, the likes of Antrim might have 7 or 8 games, depending on many, if you were accommodating London or New York, but you would have at least 7 games. And for me, the top 4 teams would then go on into the Sam Maguire, and the bottom 4 teams then would go into some secondary competition. And that way, everybody has the ability to compete in either the Sam Maguire, or if they're not up to it at that particular time, then in a secondary competition, which gets everybody summer football, and hopefully will bring teams along. Those 4 teams at the top tier then would go into an open draw, and from that then that would reinvigorate the championship again. And similarly, in terms of the bottom teams, they would go into a last 16 or wherever it may be, if we're accommodating London and New York, into a competition of 16 or 18 or whatever it is, an open draw format. So that's the way I would have envisaged it. What really shocks me is that the President has pushed this through in advance of the Football Committee coming back at the end of November with their proposals, and I just cannot get my head around that. Why would you introduce a new competition before the committee which you've pulled together and organised to design something which is going to look at both the club and the county fixtures? It just does not make sense.
Too many committees?
Well, we're just not joined up. Strategically, we're not joined up. If I worked in an organisation which had 3, 4, 5 different committees all doing, and everybody's making their own decisions, you would never get away with it. You have various committees to look at, and you delegate work out, and you have a look at various things which you want to improve in your organisation, be it in the business world or in the sporting world. But then they would report back into, your board of governors or your board, or in this case Central Council, with proposals, and then you would make a rational, factual based decision, rather than what appears to be happening here is that the President wants to leave some sort of legacy with his competition, which he stated from day one he wants a second tier competition, and meanwhile the people in the committee would have been formed to go and look at things from a holistic point of view have almost been disregarded.
I think you could be hitting on a point there. Presidents trying to create legacies and leave legacies behind them. Cahal, much as that chimes with you?
Well, it chimes with a lot of politicians at the minute, but I will maybe stay clear of that there. But I do think, and that's the big point was Lenny's hit on there, is why actually put together a fixtures committee who have one job, literally, to look at the fixtures and come back in terms of a games report as to what works and what suggestions. You know, when we have that information and you're speaking from a position of knowledge as to what works and what doesn't work, or even some suggestions about, you know, alternative thinking. And I know John Horan came in on the basis that I'm the man that's going to push through a Tier 2 championship, and, you know, he was pretty much elected on that mandate. But notwithstanding that, what's the point then in putting together this fixtures committee so that they can look at it? And it's cart before the horse. Let them produce their report, look at it, sit down with the best and brightest that we have in this association and say what works and what doesn't work. In terms of the Tier Championship, I have been an advocate for it, but on the basis that it's done properly. And, you know, we've seen previously championships that we've put together that haven't been promoted and haven't been given the due respect that they should. And it remains to be seen how this is going to actually work out. I myself am in favour of maybe a Champions League format, and then looking at it in terms of both a tiered championship, maybe 1, 2 and 3 potentially, and looking at that as a festival of football as opposed to having a full year-round situation where it's over in June and July, and then the lifeblood of the association that we've spoken about before, the club, is put there, and it is put up on the pedestal that it should, because some of the club games at the weekend earlier on, look at the likes of the Antrim County final with Slavjarg and Carrigan, brilliant games, edge your seat stuff, and I think really that's where the focus of the GAA should be, because the GAA at its grassroots is community based, and this push to professionalism, and that's something I'm going to look at in the next column. But we should be re-evaluating what our priorities are as an association, and the tiered championship is one part of it, but that holistic view of what we are and where we are going, it needs to happen, and it needs to happen now.
The clubs have to help themselves too. You know, from a county perspective, and you look throughout Ireland and the fixtures and trying to accommodate county and clubs, too many clubs are very happy to call off a game with 2 players missing, and consequently, you know, impacting the best part of 40 players by saying we're not playing because we have 2 men missing. So clubs really have to take a serious look at themselves too, instead of just citing all the problems with county teams taking their players away. Clubs have to somehow balance that as well.
I wanted to ask you what you thought of the club championships, Lenny. Would you agree with Cahal? Is it getting better? Is it improving?
Yes, in the last number of years it's got a higher profile, and most certainly the quality when you look at some of the games, both on TNG and if you're watching live games, that you can see that it's a very, very competitive competition. The standard is excellent, and there's some fantastic players on view. And from an Ulster point of view, again, it's very, very competitive. There's 3 or 4 counties most certainly will be looking at the competition over the next week or two. Kilcool, you know, have an opportunity here to kick on. They've won down a number of times. They played in the Ulster Championship, so they've got that bit of experience. They and a Tyrone team, you know, it's been a long time since a Tyrone team, you know, lots of talent there, very competitive competition in Tyrone. So can Trillick do something? Clontibbert have just come out of Monaghan after beating Scottstown, who were quite formidable over the last couple of seasons, so maybe they'll fancy their chances, but they've got to get over the hurdle of Crossmaglen, who have a fantastic tradition, and then you've got the drawing game up in Donegal. So who's going to come out of that? So it's bubbling towards a very, very interesting competitive competition over the next 4 or 5 weeks.
I think that's all we've got time for, but Cahal, thanks for coming. Lenny, thanks for coming.
Okay, not at all.
Thank you, Ronan.